The harder they fall. I don't think I need to explain my love and appreciation for this movie. The cinematography is great, and of course I love and adore the soundtrack. And even some of the music that I said I didn't like before has started to grow on me. If you haven't seen this movie, go on to Netflix, search it up, The Harder They Fall, and sit your ass down and watch this magnificent, great movie. And if after you've seen it and you think that I may have been overpraising this movie, then you can go f yourself. This is my third video that I've made about this film. And it's not just because I love kissing this movie's but it's more because I love its theatrics. Every actor that's in this movie does an amazing job at the role they play. Lakeith Stanfield and Zazie Beetz are great examples, with Lakeith Stanfield's Cherokee Bill being a huge fan favorite, including me. James Samuel did an amazing job with this movie. And it's crazy because every time I sit down and rewatch this movie, I always end up loving it just a bit more. And if I'm looking for something quick to watch, say 30 to 25 minutes, I'll just turn on this movie and fast forward to where Cherokee Bill has his gun pointed at Nat Love, and I'll watch it from there. That entire final battle from start to finish will always hold a special place in my heart. But it's what comes after that, what the whole battle was even for, the climax of this entire movie. The scene that makes this good film a great one. It's the scene between Jonathan Majors' Nat Love and Idris Elba's Rufus Buck. The scene that made me ultimately fall in love with Idris Elba and Jonathan Majors. I've never been a huge fan of Idris Elba, but I mean, I always thought he was okay, but I never really thought of him to be able to play such a compelling villain like Rufus Buck. Sure, I've seen him in movies like Pacific Rim, Hobbs and Shaw, Zootopia, but I've never been so impressed with him as an actor where I just stop and say, holy shit, that was great. The same goes for Jonathan Majors. I've seen him in movies and shows like Loki and Hostiles, but again, nothing that really wowed me. Then, of course, The Harder They Fall came out of the closet. And I'm not going to give you that this film means so much to me because it came out during a really tough period of my life, because that would not be true. Actually, when this movie came out, I was anticipating Spider-Man No Way Home. So at the very most, this movie was an afterthought. But the interesting part of that is No Way Home came out the same year as The Harder They Fall did. And I've rewatched the latter so much more than No Way Home. Anyways, the point being is I always thought of Idris Elba and Jonathan Majors as nothing more than actors who can play decent side characters and subpar villains. But The Harder They Fall changes that. When we start the scene, it's obvious that Nat Love enters the building with a certain sense of caution as he begins to look for the man that murdered his mother and father at around the age of 10, all them years ago. The man that I am referring to is Rufus Buck, the cold-hearted gunslinger, bank robber, thief, and murderer of this story. Nat Love sees him sitting at a desk that's still surprisingly put together, because moments earlier, Rufus Buck had shot a bag of dynamite out of his once brother, Wiley Esco, who had given up Rufus to law enforcement years prior. As Nat Love cautiously stalks towards Rufus, gun pointed at his head, he tells him to pick up his guns, because if Love is gonna get revenge, he's gonna do it the right way, the fair and honorable way. Rufus almost ignores that demand and tells him that it's the eyes. Now, real head scratcher, as we can see, even Nat Love is a bit confused about Rufus's out of left field comment. Nat Love demands that he pick up his guns. Rufus again ignores him and asks Nat if his father, that he killed, was a good man. This question puzzles Nat, as he says that, yes, him and his mother both were. It's here that we see Jonathan Majors' acting ability on full display. He's able to fully capture the emotions of both sorrow, regret, and anger all at the same time, whilst also making sure it looks realistic and not too melodramatic. The way Idris Elba delivers the line and then Jonathan Majors being able to reciprocate it is just mwah. Even the little part here after Rufus asks Nat the question, Jonathan Majors does an amazing job at expressing that very emotion, along with that little detail of him also processing the question. As the scene goes on, Rufus begins to tell Nat about his upbringing. He says that it was far different from Nat's because, well, Nat had a loving father and mother. His father was abusive, and along with being an outlaw, would beat his mother to a pulp. One day, Rufus was about to get a beating from his father, but his mother took a bottle to protect him. She was able to cut him while defending Rufus, which consequently caused his father to divert his aggression towards her, which resulted in her death. Rufus says that after his father had fled and left him alone with his lifeless mother, and it's here too that we see Idris Elba's acting ability. As he's speaking these lines to Jonathan Majors, you can feel the emotion he's feeling. Idris Elba does a great job at displaying the character as this old and somewhat wise man who's chosen the destiny that he wants to go out on. But along with being this character that has suffered much turmoil in his life, Rufus goes on to tell Nat that he was about the same age as he was when he gave him the crucifix scar on his head, telling him that all he could do was survive this world as best he could. At the same time, Rufus couldn't help but think about wanting to see his father pay for what he did. He says he searched for his father for years, but to no avail, until one day, he found him and begins describing what he looked like. We, the audience, can feel something. We don't know exactly what that something is, but we can definitely feel that something ain't right. Of course, this feeling wouldn't feel the same way without the performances of Idris Elba and Jonathan Majors. We can see the wiring going on in Nat's head as he slowly starts to see where Rufus is going with this story about his father, but it isn't fully revealed to us yet. Rufus says that his father had given himself a rebirth, a renaissance to his image and to his morals. He had a new wife, he was sober, man of God, and he had a son about the age of 10 years old, going by the last name of Love. Holy shit. You almost can't believe it. Just a crazy twist. I love it. It gets me every time. It doesn't matter how many times I rewatch this film, I'm always heartbroken to see Nat Love's reaction. And the credit really has to go to Jonathan Majors being able to put on such an outstanding performance. You can literally feel the pain in Nat Love's eyes. He swears Rufus Buck is lying, and praying that he is, but also at the same time knowing that Rufus doesn't have any reason to lie to him. No reason to bamboozle him this time. And as Nat accuses him of lying, we can see the pain in Rufus Buck's eyes as well. And of course, this goes to the credit of Idris Elba's acting ability being able to convey that level of emotion. Rufus tells Nat that killing their father was retribution, but to him, it wasn't enough. Letting Nat live was the true revenge, making sure that Nat would become worse than him and their father. He wanted to make sure that Nat became everything their father tried to run away from. When once again, you can see Idris Elba and Jonathan Majors feel like they're putting on a performance of a lifetime. Rufus tells him that he's going to surpass even Rufus himself, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, he could never kill his own brother. But to me, I feel like that's debatable. But we'll just have to take his word for it. He calls Nat Love Nathaniel Buck after he tells him it's time for him to take his revenge, and this time it's the other way around where Rufus is demanding that Nat shoot him. Jonathan Majors is able to present to us the difficulty that he has of pulling the trigger. Pretty soon, Nat slowly lifts up his gun to Rufus's stomach, and he finally pulls the trigger. Nat often reminds me of Arno Dorian from Assassin's Creed Unity, especially in this scene. Arno isn't like Ezio, where he spares and decides not to kill the man who killed his family. Even after Arno defeats Thomas Germach, he slowly stabs him with his hidden blade, just like how Nat slowly lifts up his gun and begins repeatedly shooting Rufus. Nat isn't like the standard good guys set out to get revenge for their father, only by the end not to take it. I low-key hate when movies end like this, especially when the whole time that's what the character was set out to do. The Harder They Fall reminds me a lot of Django Unchained. And before you draw to any conclusions, no, it's not that. It's because in Django also isn't afraid of taking his revenge. Something that Quentin Tarantino wrote to destroy that cliche. But something that I love that The Harder They Fall does especially well is how taking that revenge affects the character. After Nat exits the building, he goes up to Mary and embraces her. And she asks, "Is the devil dead?" referring to Rufus. And Nat Love responds with a gentle but disheartening, "I don't know."
Is the devil dead?
I don't know.
The scene concludes after Nat has fully taken and fulfilled his revenge for his father and mother. He squats down to Rufus and pulls his mother's ring from out of one of his pockets, adjusts his brother's suit, showing us that he understands that his brother had to take revenge on their father, but at the very least, he killed Rufus to avenge his mother, who had no business in the conflict between him and their father. Now, Nat does understand that, but also knows that Rufus needed to die. As Nat draws a cross on Rufus's forehead, we know that this conflict is over with this bittersweet end. Guys, I completely and utterly love this film. It still manages to make me feel a certain type of way every time I sit down and do a rewatch. But easily, my favorite part about this movie is the final scene between Nat Love and Rufus Buck. Jonathan Majors and Idris Elba put on a legendary performance that I'm not sure the two actors even realized they put on. And I still believe that Jonathan Majors could have won an Oscar for this scene alone. But I guess nothing can beat King Richard.
Keep fucking my wife's mouth!
I'm going to, okay? I could,
I almost forgot to mention the soundtrack in this scene. I love it. A huge shout out to James Samuel, because the track that plays during the scene is nothing more than amazing. If you've not seen The Harder They Fall, what are you doing? Go watch it. You won't regret it. All right, folks. That's all I've got for you for today's video, but we will see each other again. Remember to follow God, stay focused, ignore the distractions, protect your energy, and without further ado, peace!